Well, radioactivity. Further discussion of other aspects of the radioactivity age estimates does not appear necessary here. The important features of these data are all now seen to be explainable in terms of the phenomena and the activity associated with the creation and the deluge. It is not at all necessary to interpret them as teaching the immense ages hitherto inferred therefrom. In fact, the gross and entirely unwarranted assumptions on which they are based, especially uniformity and denial of any true creation, in contrast to the sound basis in Holy Scripture upon which the assumptions in our interpretation are based, justify the assertion that the latter is actually much better oriented scientifically than the former. Science. Now, science is repeatable, observable, falsifiable. Uniformitarianism and evolution is not science. It's guesstimates. It's scientific experimentation on some things that may or may not be long-term or short-term. And every time we've investigated here too on things that we can observe, which is partly scientific, we can observe and report. We can't falsify because we can't set up a scenario by which creation or evolution or the world got to where it's gotten today. So it's scientific experimentation, the best explanation for all of this that we can observe scientifically. Scientific explanation is a worldwide flood, something catastrophic. In any case, let's continue to the next point, conclusion. The Bible quite plainly and irrefutably teaches the fact of grown creation, one with an apparent age of some sort, analogous to the apparent age of a mature atom at the first instant of his existence. The uniqueness of Adam and Eve's creation is emphasized in the New Testament. For Adam was formed, then Eve, 1 Timothy 2:13. Now, we can't prove it either way scientifically. But man was there from the beginning, and we just looked at a couple of things. An artifact of a bronze vase, ornately decorated by a highly intelligent artisan, way before, according to the uniformitarianist, evolutionist, way before life existed. Well, how'd that happen? And the rock strata that appears to have life forms in it have examples of all life forms, albeit smaller forms, because catastrophic water deluge would put the smaller items more spherical and dense at the bottom. And the rest, the larger ones, probably, especially mammals, would be broken up and not get to become fossils. For the man is not of the woman, but the woman of the man, 1 Corinthians 11:8. Similarly, most of the biblical miracles stress true creative activity in which the time factor is immensely compressed. For example, the transformation of water into wine, John 2:10. Creation of apparent age, in other words. Look at radiometric dating. We don't know. We weren't there. But apparently the world was not exposed to external radiation, which might have excited these radioactive minerals that we've been looking at to show the appearance of radiation a lot more rapidly than would have been had there been no external radiation to excite it. So this creation must have included all the chemical elements already organized in all the organic and inorganic chemical compounds and mixtures necessary to support the processes of the Earth and of life on the Earth. These processes include the phenomena of radioactivity. It is possible, perhaps, but not biblical, that only the parent elements of the radioactivity decay chains were originally created, but it is eminently more harmonious with the whole concept of a complete, and I say biblical, creation to say that all the elements of the chain. Sorry for that interruption. This creation must have included all the chemical elements already organized and all the organic and inorganic chemical compounds and mixtures necessary to support the processes of the Earth and of the life on the Earth. These processes include the phenomena of radioactivity. It is possible, perhaps, but not biblical, that only the parent elements of the radioactivity decay chains were originally created, but it is eminently more harmonious with the whole concept of a complete biblical creation to say that all the elements of the chain were also created simultaneously, most likely in a state of radioactive equilibrium. That's most plausible. This means that with each mineral containing a radioactive element, there were also, at the original creation, all of the daughter elements in the decay series, including some of the final stable end product. Therefore, how do you measure? One didn't evolve into another. They're all there. Things happen so quickly and then so disruptively, catastrophically, that there's no way of measuring anything of a consistent value because people that are trying to measure stuff, they weren't there, and they can't repeat it. You can't observe it, repeat it, and falsify it. So you have to come up with the best, most scientific solution. That would be the Bible. Such a concept is undoubtedly shocking to the mind of a consistent uniformitarian, but there is nothing impossible or unreasonable about it. I talked with a guy the other day about science. He says, well, evolution has been proved scientifically. I said, were you there? Can you falsify it? What's the most plausible explanation? Even the most famous of his day, Stephen Gould, said there's something catastrophic about all of this. He says, well, that guy's he's an amateur. Well, that's all he's got. The most famous evolutionist, Stephen Gould from Harvard, he's an amateur because he sees something that's catastrophic in nature that can't be explained over a long period of time. In fact, short of denying the existence of any creator or original creation at all, one must logically come to some place in the long chain of secondary causes where something was created. If so, that something at the instant of its creation must have had an experience of age, an appearance of age, and that the only way we could then determine its true age would be through divine revelation. First of all, I talked to another guy in front of my building about you're the Christian, blah, 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 blah. I said, well, let's put all these labels aside and say one thing. I'm looking at the most advanced, complicated thing in the universe. And he looked at me kind of funny. I said, your body, your human body. There's nothing more complex than it. How did anything less complex evolve into something more complex? There was nothing more in the less. He looked at me. He had nothing to say. Something or somebody, some force, whatever you want to call it, I call it God, the Bible, created you. Nothing else came out of deep outer space or wherever that was capable and more complex, because to create something that's really highly complex, the creator, whatever it was, what entity it was, has to be complicated enough to have done that. A rock can't create something like a single-celled organism that's alive, that reproduce. How often have you seen a rock reproduce another rock? Anyway, an apparent age might of course be deduced. For that, something on the basis of any processes of change which were observed in connection with it, but this would not be the true age. So if something was created in a laboratory, complete and finished, say, well, where did that come from? It didn't come from anything. It was created originally and is totally and fully functioning as a human being. Something less than that didn't exist because something less complicated can't devise certain things that are more complicated than itself. And this is exactly the situation we find in connection with these radioactive elements and with many other geochronometers. It is eminently reasonable and consistent with the basically efficient and beneficent character of God, as well as with his revelation concerning the fact that he would have created the entire universe as a complete operational functioning mechanism. The grossly cruel and wasteful processes of an almost interminable, wearisomely protracted evolution leading up to man's arrival at its goal, as usually envisioned by uniformitarians, or at least by theistic uniformitarians, are, on the other hand, utterly inconsistent with the character and wisdom of God. It is therefore not ridiculous at all, but perfectly reasonable, to presuppose that the radiogenic elements, like all other elements, were created directly by God. So, in the absence of specific revelation, it seems impossible to decide this question with finality. However, it is more satisfying teleologically, in other words, to explain everything from a design rather than from an evolved standpoint, and therefore more reasonable to infer that all these primeval clocks, since they were wound up at the same time, were also set to read the same time, whatever this setting was. We may call it the apparent age of the earth, but the true age of the earth can only be known by means of divine revelation, which today is limited to the Bible. I see enough, I've studied enough in the Bible, predictions of the future, complete lack of contradiction, complete support, coordination of all the different teachings of the Bible without contradiction. Predictions of the future perfectly arrived at so far to the T. So I can trust what it says until something better comes along. I can say that. I don't believe the whole Bible yet. I haven't studied the whole Bible. But right now, what I've so far read and tested out as best I can, I don't find any problem with it. I find it's very trustworthy. So we conclude, therefore, that at a time measurement based on the principle of radioactive decay is in itself quite inconclusive. It is, in the first place, quite reasonable to believe that both parent and daughter elements in each radioactive chain were created at the beginning, probably in equilibrium amounts. We have all kinds of indications that the Earth was much better before all of this today that we're reviewing and observing. And we had seas that were shallow, and temperatures that were wonderful, and people that lived a lot longer. Animals, mammals, lived a lot longer, more productive, larger species, and not disease and everything else. It seems from these tales and from the Bible account that these things were far better. So it's better to think that these things were in their perfection point and reference, and it deteriorated, devolved, not evolved. The amount of originally created radiogenic end product in each chain is uncertain. It is likely, however, that homologous amounts were created in all such minerals, so that all such elements would, when created, give an appearance of the same degree of maturity or of age. How do you measure age? When people lived 1,000 years or more. And then later on, we find people live less and less. Disease brings things to an end even more quickly. And all kinds of things we see are not anywhere near where they used to be. Look at the fossil record. Look at the Bible or other stories that are not other stories, but other accounts, how things were so much better. Furthermore, the intense environmental radiation present in the upper atmosphere could well have resulted in much higher decay rates for the radioactive elements at one or more times in the past. Beginning of creation, and then we have, after the worldwide flood, we have evidence of those things.